All right, the next thing we will do is an outlet and a accompanying plug. So I found some reference images. Here's going to be the outlet, and the plug as the reference is going to be this image. We will start with the outlet first, and I'm going to actually use that reference image in my scene. So I'm going to go to my front view and click on this button right here, which says add an image plane. And I'm going to navigate to where I saved it, which I think I saved it in the wrong project. It's in demo files, source images. Nope. Let's see. It is in demo files. No, it's not in demo files. It's in class prep. Images. Outlet. There we go. So here is my source image. And I'm going to keep it centered. That's almost centered. Needs to move over just a little bit. And maybe up just a little bit. Okay, once I have that, I'm going to put it on its own layer and make that layer a reference layer so that I cannot select it accidentally, and it'll just be there as reference. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to, in my outliner, I'm going to select the image plane, go to my attribute editor, and adjust the alpha gain down to about 50% so that it's semi-transparent. Okay, so now I'm going to first break down how I'm going to model this, something that I should have done with the pizza box because, as you saw, I ran into a little bit of trouble, and I would like to avoid that this time. So the first thing I'm going to do is this outer plate, and the plate is just going to be, I'm going to start with a plane. The plate is symmetrical across the horizontal axis, right? The top is the same as the bottom, roughly. So I'm just going to model the top, and then I will mirror that down to the bottom. From there, I will do the top plug, and that will be a separate object. I will also start with a plane from there. Once I have that right, then I will just duplicate that down to the bottom, and then the screw will probably come in last, and that'll be just a super quick thing. So that's the plane of attack. Let's start with a plane, and that plane we need to rotate along the x-axis so that it is standing up straight, and I'm just going to I'll just scale it up so that it matches my reference. Now, because I'm just using this reference, I'm not worrying too much about real-world scale. I can scale the whole thing later once I'm done modeling. So right now I'm just going to worry about getting the modeling right. So I'm going to scale it to kind of the beginning of that bevel that you see around the outside. From there, I will select, turn off my soft select. Don't need that now. Oops. From there, I will select my outside edge perimeter, and I'm going to extrude it. And I want to just worry about the offset. And I'm going to make that offset line up with my reference. Oops. Come on. There we go. 0.4. Seems to work. Then I'm going to jump into my 3D view and push that back a little bit so that we actually have that bevel. Also, the reference image is kind of getting in the way, so I'm going to select that in my outliner and just push the whole thing back. Great. So that is most of the outlet. Last thing I need to do, well, two more things I need to do. I need to define the openings for the actual outlet, and then I also need to make this the opening for the screw. And let's start with the screw. So I'm going to go to my offset edge loop tool, which is going to add an edge loop on either side of whatever edge I click on. So, oops, let me go into my viewport here. Hopefully you can see this. Maybe solid's easier. So shift right click, insert or offset edge loop tool, and I'm going to click on this edge, and you can see that's going to add one right there. That looks good. Double check here in this view. I can always scale them apart from each other if I need to adjust that size. I'll go with that. Okay, and I want to add a couple more edge loops just so that I can have enough detail in the circle. So I'm going to go to my modeling toolkit. I'm going to go to multi-cut. I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to middle click on these gaps, and it's going to add an edge loop right in the center of them. That looks good enough, I think. Yep. Great. Now I'm going to select these inside faces here. And go to Mesh, Edit Mesh, and Circularize. And you can see it made them into a perfect circle, except it's a little bit twisted, so I'm just going to dial that twist back 30 degrees, and then delete those faces. Okay, and we'll look here in the perspective view. You can see that I now have a circular hole in my mesh. Right, that's one done. The last one is this top outlet. And so, same sort of thing. We need to first define the edges with edge loops. So move that one down, or up. This one I will move down. And then I'm going to define this curve with, you can do it with 2, and you can do it with 3, and you can do it with 4. I'll go with 4 just so that it's nicely detailed. First I'm going to delete this edge, so Control Delete, and then I'm going to click and drag across all of these faces and go to my Connect tool and set my segments to 4. And now I have 4 evenly spaced edges added. Again, I'll go to perspective view so you can see that. Okay. So now what I need to do is select some vertices and start defining this outside shape. So I'm going to do this kind of in pairs because I want it to stay symmetrical. Select those 4, scale them out, and then select these 4, scale those out, and then I'm going to select these 4 and scale those in. Okay, so I have defined the outside shape of this outlet. Right, you can see it here. It's from that face to this face and across, right? But by doing that, I've also kind of made some sharp angles in the rest of my mesh, and just to keep things relatively clean and even, I'm going to even these out just a little bit so that there are smoother transitions in the edges. Okay, and just a little bit, doesn't have to be much. Okay. So I think that just about does it for that shape. I can now, I have those faces selected. Oops, undo that. Accidentally extruded, I think. I'll select these inside faces and hit delete. Okay. So now I have defined that. Now, what I want to do just to make sure that I've got some flexibility later, so I'm going to select this inside edge, hold down Shift, and extrude the edge, and just adjust the offset just a little bit. Something like 0.03, 0.04 will do it. So that I've got that face loop right around the edge. And if I need to sharpen that up later, I can do that. Okay, so I've got the top defined. I don't need to do the same thing on the bottom because I'm just going to mirror it. So let's do that now. I'm Go to my front view. Go to grab all of my lower half faces and delete them. And then I will go into object mode and mesh, mirror. And we want to mirror across the x-axis. And we want to go to, actually no, sorry. Y-axis, negative Y. World, no offset, combine with original, merge border vertices. I will click mirror, and there we go. So now we have a perfectly symmetrical outlet plate cover. I'll turn off the reference layer so you can see. I'm also going to turn off the grid because that's in the way. There we go. Now, if I hit 3 on the number pad, you can see that things are a little bit soft. So I'm going to select this edge right here, this kind of border edge, and I'm going to add a bevel to it. So in my modeling toolkit, we have bevel, and I'm going to go something real subtle. I don't know, 0.05 seems to work for me. Hit return. Well, don't actually have to do that. 3 on the number pad, and now we're going to see that sharper edge. There we go. So that's a little bit sharper now, just to sharpen the corners. I can select these edges, and actually I could have selected these all at the same time, but I did the bevel, but this will work too. And I will bevel these as well. Good. And now we've got a nice sharp outlet plate. So that's part 1. Okay, so that part's done. Now we need to do the actual outlets that go behind the face. So I'm going to turn my reference layer back on, and I'm going to add a new plane. Oh, first I'm going to name things. Outlet cover is going to be what that's called. Then I'm going to add a new plane. This one is going to be called outlet. Okay. This needs to be rotated around the x-axis 90 degrees so that it is standing up. And I'm going to jump into front view and start placing it. Nice thing about this object is it is fairly flat and you can work mostly in the front view, but you should still occasionally look at it in perspective and side and top and just make sure things are still looking good from all angles. So there's actually a couple of ways we can do this, and I could start from scratch with this plane, but thinking about it and looking at this geometry, I want to show a different technique. So I'm going to delete that and go into my outlet cover, and I'm going to select edge mode. I'm going to select this innermost edge, and then I'm going to go up to the, remember which menu it's in. We want to duplicate, and then we want to detach it. So there it is. That's face. All right, I'm going to select that full face loop then. So I'm just going to click on that, double click there. So if you select one face, hold down Shift and double click on the face next to it, it'll select the face loop. Speedy way to get that done. Then I can go to Edit Mesh and duplicate. So duplicated those faces, and then with those still selected, I can go to Extract, and it's going to make those their own object. Okay, so now I'm going to Object Mode. I'm going to put the cover on its own layer as well, and I'm just going to turn that off. I'll also name the layer so I know. Cover, save, okay. So it duplicated those faces. I extracted them so I know they are already the right shape. They just need to be scaled down a little bit because we need to have this little gap between the cover and the outlet itself. So I'll go into face mode, and I'm just going to scale it down just a smidge. That looks good, maybe a little bit more that way. Close enough, we can always adjust that later. But I've got that. Now I need to fill in the faces here and then kind of define those edges for the opening and cut those out. So I'm going to do this in perspective view with the reference layer off because I don't need that visible right now. I'm going to select these 3 edges and these 3 edges and bridge those. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to connect it vertically. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges. So I'm going to go to face, select those faces, use connect, and set that to 5. Okay, so now I have the right number of edge loops. I can select all of those edges, deselect the side ones, and bridge those together. And same thing on the bottom, and bridge those together. So now that I have that, I can turn my reference back on. And I'll jump back to my front view. And now I want to start pushing these vertices around and defining the shapes that I need. So, oops, there we go. We'll start with the top parts. And I can grab these edges and I can bring those down. Actually, I'm gonna define kind of the start of this bevel, not the openings right now. I'll bring those down to that bevel. I want a couple more edge loops here. I know I'll need them anyway. So I'll go to Modeling Toolkit and my multi-cut tool, hold down Control, and again, middle click, we'll add it in the center. Okay, now I've got a little bit more geometry to work with. There's a couple things I need to do. When I added those edge loops, it also added, it went all the way to the edge, which means I now have a flat spot here. Right, if I hit 3, you can see it's a little bit flatter than the rest. And I want to maintain that round form, so I need to go in here, select the vertices, and just move them back out and make sure that I'm maintaining that rounded form. Same thing down here and down here. Okay, I just want to make sure that stays smooth the whole way through. Now that I've got that, I can get back to defining the shape of this bevel. And again, I'm doing this in pairs so things stay symmetrical. You'll notice that the reference image is no longer perfectly lining up. That's okay. I can just approximate between the two. No reference is perfect. And this is close enough. Okay, and then this can be wider here. Good. And then you can see that there's a kind of a flat spot in here. So I want to add a couple more edge loops there. And for this, I'm going to do this via offset edge loop. So shift right click, offset edge loop tool, and move that in there to define that. And I think I'm good to start. Oh, not quite ready to start extruding. I got a couple more things I need to do. I need to add enough edge loops vertically so that I can define the sides of the prong openings. So back to multi-cut, and again, I'm just going to add them in the center, and then I will slide the vertices around where they need to go. Select all of those, scale them in. Now, these vertices in the center, I want to keep them lined up with the top and the bottom with the corners. So I'm going to turn on point snapping and just snap them horizontally across so that they line up. Actually, these don't line up at all, so I want to make sure that they do line up. There we go. Okay, at this point I need to diverge from symmetry because one prong is taller than the other. So I'm just going to work on the left side, and then I will move over to the right side. move that up. Move this down. That's not even, so I'm going to hold down the V key, which will temporarily turn on vertex snapping. Snap it in line. And I'll bring these up. Those are good. We can bring these up so they're a little bit more centered with their individual openings. All right, so that's all good. Now we can start extruding. So I'm going to select all of these faces here, this whole section. And now the whole thing actually goes in a little bit first, and then I'll deselect the center faces and continue extruding. So let's go into the side view. Hold down Shift. Actually, no, I'm going to do this with the extrude tool. And we'll extrude it back a little bit. And then I'm going to adjust the offset as well, so that it tapers in cleanly. That looks pretty good. It might be a little too thick, so maybe I'll slide that back in. Something like that, I think. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So I've got that, and now what I need to do is continue that taper for each of the individual prongs. So I'm just going to select those faces that are defining that opening and just push those back a little bit more. Yeah. Let's push them back a little bit more. And then I'm going to delete those faces. And now you can see that we've got these hard angles in here. And so what I need to do, I think I'm just going to add some triangles. I think this is going to be one of those times when a triangle is going to be okay, because it's a... no, I'm not. Just so you guys can see how to work around adding triangles. I'm going to select this edge. How am I going to do this? No, we're going to do triangles. Multi-cut, and I'm just going to connect the corners. Hit return. And now it's going to behave a lot better for me. I'll have to clean up some of these edges. They're a little bit weird, but... So now I've got the corners in there. Oops. Let's see, we mostly have it. We need to add a little bit more detail here so we keep things sharp where we want them to be sharp and smooth where we want them to be smooth. So... but first, actually, we have to do this lower bit. How are we doing on time? 23 minutes. I'm going to skip the lower bit. It's going to be the same as what we just did, just a little bit simpler. So the last thing I'm going to do is just sharpen this up so that it, when we hit smooth, that it looks good. So I'm going to select this edge here, as well as these inner edges. Actually, before I do that, I need to even these out because that's messy, and I don't want it to be messy. So let me turn off the reference. Let's see. Maybe I do need to go this way. Well, I guess in perspective, it's not terrible. Let's give it a shot. Oops. That one. Grab all those. And those corner ones, and let's bevel those. Again, we'll keep that fairly small. And I'm going to add one additional segment to this as well. Okay, go back to object mode, let 3, see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Last thing we need to do, well, I keep saying last thing, it's never the last thing. The next thing is we're going to extrude those openings in a little bit just so that they don't end flat. So give it a little bit of depth, and then I'm going to extrude it one more time, but I'm just going to increase the offset. Well, not the offset, maybe the thickness. There we go. Okay, so now it has a little bit of a lip that will both catch the light if you're close enough to it, and gives it the illusion that there is some thickness there and it's not, you know, razor thin. And actually, we should do that same thing to this outer edge. So I'm just going to extrude it back a little bit, then I'll extrude it back a little bit more and just scale it in ever so slightly, giving it, again, some thickness. Now let's turn the cover back on. We'll smooth that, see how we did. Okay, so we can see that there's a little bit of a shape issue here, but nothing we can't handle. Just going to go to vertex mode. Oops, on this one. And I'll select these vertices, and we will just move them up a little bit. And we can move these up a little bit, and just try to get that a little fitting a little bit better. So we need to bring these in a little bit too, so. Oops. Maybe we'll select those. Actually, just gonna move these in by hand. I'll do the same thing over here. There we go. That's better. Now just imagine that there's also a hole right here. I'll do one real quick just so that it looks slightly better. I'll just extrude the face, scale it down, and extrude it in and delete the faces. And add a quick edge loop. Oops. Oh, I see. There we go. Okay, so there is our outlet and outlet plate. The plug is kind of the same thing in reverse. Instead of extruding in, you're extruding out. But it's the same sort of deal. I would also, you can see right here, you can actually see through and back, so it might be a good idea to, instead of extruding these back a little bit, give it some real thickness. So I'll just select this back face loop and move it back. Okay, so now you can't really see behind it, and I'd do the same thing here on the outlet cover. Just give it a little bit more thickness, and actually that's not really something that I did at all. So select that edge and extrude it back a little bit, and I'll extrude it back a little bit more. So now when we smooth things out, that looks much more realistic than paper thin edges.